So thanks again for being here tonight. We're excited to talk about sensory processing and sensory strategies over the holidays. We have a lot of information in this presentation, so we're going to spend 30 minutes, maybe 30 minutes plus, talking about some of these holiday strategies. And then we're going to leave some time for questions. And if a question ends up kind of coming up in your mind as we go, feel free to add it to the chat. We'll try to keep our eye on the chat and either kind of answer your question in the moment, or we'll get to it to the end. So either put it in the chat or save it, and we'll get to it at the end. We're happy to have some time for questions then. And then also, as a note, I'm sure you heard the notification when you logged on, but we are recording this talk. So if you're concerned about privacy, please feel free to leave the cameras off. You can also change the name, the way your name appears in Zoom, if that's a concern. And also, you're welcome to have access to this talk afterwards. We're going to try to put it up on our YouTube page. So we'll send out information about that as well. So if you have to jump off and put kids to bed or do something and get some laundry going, we'll have this recorded. Okay, so I'm Karen Swinehart, and I'm here with Kerry Bunger, and we are occupational therapists from Development as Child's Play. And I think many of you, most of you probably are Development as Child's Play family, but if you are not, Development as Child's Play is a multidisciplinary pediatric therapy clinic in Cupertino. So at the ICP, we offer occupational therapy with a focus on sensory integration and sensory processing. We also have physical therapy, speech and language pathology, which right now is on hold, but we are in the process of interviewing some speech therapists. So we're hopeful that our speech program will come back. And our latest program is our community therapy program, where we partner with local preschools. So we go to the school, we do screenings for the kids there. And the screenings that we do are based on either kids who have been identified by their teachers or by their parents as having possible motor, developmental, or sensory needs. And then we offer evaluation and therapy services either at the school during the school day, in the classroom, or at our clinic. So if the needs can't be met in the classroom, then we offer evaluation and therapy here at the ICP. So if your child attends, or if your family is associated with any local preschools or daycare centers that might be interested in being a partner in this community therapy program, you can email me, and my email is going to come up later, but we'll also put it in the chat. Maybe Kerry, you can put our emails in the chat. And let us know in the chat if you have a school that might be interested in participating in this program. And we can also kind of do presentations like the one we're doing tonight, or more basic, more general presentations about sensory integration and sensory processing in the classroom. So if that's something that your school might benefit from, either for the teachers or for the parents, let us know. We're happy to come partner with your school. So I'm going to make sure everyone's muted. Sure. Okay. So just a quick overview of occupational therapy, since that's what Kerry and I both do. So what occupational therapy is that we use a child's preferred occupation to help them develop new skills or grow in their goal areas. And that can include gross motor, fine motor, like handwriting, self-care, shoe tying, buttons, executive functioning skills. And we do that by focusing on the foundations of sensory processing, self-regulation, and motor skills. And we try to make everything really child-friendly, child-centered, and fun. Okay. So did I go too far? I have gone too far. Let me go back. Nope. All right. So jumping into sensory integration, sensory processing. So many people are familiar with the 5 senses: vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But we actually have 8 senses. So we're going to talk more specifically about these sensory systems later. But briefly, we'll start with the vestibular system. That's our sense of movement and balance. Then we have our proprioceptive system that tells us our body position without needing to use our vision. So, you know, it's how I know without looking that my hand is up. It also tells us how much force to use for a certain activities, like how to pick up a glass that's full versus how to pick up a glass that's empty. I don't know if you've ever picked up a glass thinking that it was full and it's actually empty, and it comes up too fast and you get splashed. But so that's our sense of our proprioceptive sense. And then finally, our interoceptive sense, and that's our internal awareness. So that tells us when we're hungry or thirsty or sick or you need to use the restroom. And it helps us with our emotions, so really anything that comes from the inside. And in OT, especially in sensory integration OT, we focus a lot on these sensory areas. And then sensory processing, and that's the process of taking in information from the environment, and we take it in through the receptors like our ears, our eyes, our skin, and turning those messages into a response. And it's often either a motor response or kind of a behavioral output. And so no matter what you're doing, whether you're eating a sandwich or riding a bike or reading, your ability to successfully do that depends on accurately processing sensory information. And when we aren't processing sensation efficiently, that's when we really start to notice the behavioral differences that start to affect our daily lives. And so, you know, we wanted to talk a little bit about what sensory integration is when it's happening effectively, in order to then understand what happens when that kind of breaks down, when it's not happening efficiently or effectively. And that's what we're going to kind of start talking about for the rest of the presentation. Okay, so we wanted to talk about a few of these patterns. As OTs, we, make sure everyone's muted. As OTs, we find patterns of sensory processing. And when we talk about sensory overload during the holidays, it can show up in different ways. So for someone who's generally sensory sensitive, the holiday lights and the sounds and the crowds, they might be overwhelming and might even lead to a fight or flight response, a behavioral reaction, or the need to leave the situation. And similarly, for someone who tends to have a low threshold, their tolerance for sensation is quickly met. So even just a little extra sensation will cause them a great deal of discomfort. And this is often met with behavioral reactions to the sensation because it's overwhelming and uncomfortable. And on the other hand, someone who typically under-responds to sensation, like a seeker or a craver, has a really high threshold. They might seek additional input to get their needs met. So they're the ones that are really out there moving and crashing and running and touching everything and tasting everything. And they're, you know, seeking that input to get their nervous system needs met. And especially during the holidays when the routines are a little bit different or disrupted, and they might not be getting that sensation that they're used to, that's when we want to add extra input into the day of those sensory seekers. And something important to note about these sensory patterns is that, you know, this is kind of a really neat way to define these sensory patterns, but we don't really just have one way of processing sensory input or one pattern. We have all kinds of different patterns through the day, through our lives, at different times. We do tend to skew towards one pattern, but in times of stress, like during the holidays, the patterns can definitely change. Okay, so another way to think about sensory overload, especially around the holidays, is to think about the nervous system like it's a cup. So people who are sensory sensitive might have a very small cup, and it takes a small amount of sensation to allow them to reach their threshold. So that cup could overflow very easily. under responders or the seekers, they might have a huge bucket and it takes a ton of sensation to allow them to reach their threshold. So it takes longer and more intensity to notice and respond to sensation. But the stronger the input, the faster the water drips into the cup. And when the water is at the brim of the cup, the threshold is met. And if you've got more input or more stress at that point, you're going to see that overflow. And that's where we see the dysregulation. It could look like crying or covering eyes or ears or avoiding people in places, irritability, outbursts, or even aggression when that cup overflows. So the
shutdown too.
What's that, Kerry?
Even shutdown, right? Like completely, it's just too much.
Yeah, too much shutdown. So the strategies we're going to talk about today, we're hoping can help keep that cup from overflowing. And each strategy might not be the right one for your child to get their cup back to empty, fully empty. It's not like you do one strategy and the cup is dumped out and we start all over. But, it's like pouring tiny little bits out of the cup or taking small sips to avoid that overflow, get that cup from filling all the way up and overflowing. So we've covered some of the basics. At this point, I'm going to pass it on to Kerry. She's going to talk a little more about specific challenges during the holidays.
Thank you, Karen. Sensory needs and preferences don't disappear over the holidays. And I think you as parents can actually attest that sensory needs actually increase over the holidays. The holidays can be fun and festive and are often filled with wonderful memories, but they can also be a very difficult time for kids with strong sensory needs. So some of the common holiday challenges you might run into during the big holidays. They can also apply to travel and vacation at other times of the year. So these aren't limited to just the Thanksgiving and the winter holidays that are coming up right now. When Karen and I first sat down about this talk, we had to come up with what we thought were some of the most challenges with routines and schedules during the holidays. We know that some kids do really, really well with structure and routine, and others are okay with change and maybe even enjoy the chaos of the holidays. But if anyone in your family who really benefits from routine, plan to keep your usual schedule as closely as you can, including keeping your meals, snack time, bedtime, and routine as close to what is normal for your family as possible. Most importantly, don't forget to allow for movement breaks or even increase movement opportunities when possible because the schedule has been so changed. Don't overcommit socially. Just say no. It's okay. You don't have to go to every holiday party. With the school activities, social events, and family outings, they can often make our kids feel very exhausted and overwhelmed and overloaded. And finally, make sure you're allowing for downtime, some alone time, some quiet time, some free time that they get to pick which activities they want to do. These breaks can help keep that cup from reaching the top and overflowing. Okay. And all right, thank you, Ms. Karen. As OTs, we find that preparing our kids, it can help manage expectations and diminish confusion and frustration over the changes that have happened. When you aren't able to maintain your usual routine, definitely prep your child for a change in the schedule or plan for novel elements of your day, at least a day ahead of time to give them some preparation for it. This can include giving them verbal reminders saying, hey, tomorrow we're going to be going to Aunt Sally's for the holiday dinner. A visual schedule, put it on the calendar, or even shooting, at dinner time, holding kind of family meetings to prepare the child for what they know is going to come if they're going to be traveling or needing to be wearing something different for the special holiday.
All right, we talked about another area when putting this talk together, and that is, of course, the events and the gatherings that are going to be happening at this time of year. So obviously there's more of these during the holidays, and we really recommend Making a specific plan for managing the potential overwhelm during these gatherings when possible. So a plan can include discussing with your child ahead of time if leaving early is a choice. Like, okay, we're going to be doing this thing. We're going to be going to this event. We can leave early. We're going to try to stay for 30 minutes, but just so you know, leaving is an option. Giving permission to take a break. I think sometimes so much of managing our kids' overwhelm is just giving the permission. You can take a break if you need to, and then teaching or demonstrating how to advocate for taking that break. So if you need a break, if it's getting too loud, you can, ask me or dad for a break, and we will, find a spot for you. And then agreeing on a break strategy. So this is where you might identify with your child ahead of time how they can indicate that they need a break. So how they can advocate for that. You can talk about it. Do you want me to suggest when I think it's time for you to have a break? You could suggest a break to your child. You could have a gesture that you use, a code word, whatever works for you and your family for getting that break to happen when you need it. Be specific, so designate a space for quiet time or for movement, and point that out to make sure your child can get to it or get there when they need to. And that's for both quiet time, taking a break, and for finding a space if your child really does need to move. And then take those calming items. So make sure you have your headphones, your sunglasses, weighted blankets, water bottles, fidgets, favorite toys. And then if sensory needs are especially high, it might be easier to be the host for holiday events and have everyone come to your house where it's comfortable and there's familiar smells and familiar bathrooms and bedrooms, and the child probably already has a familiar space for a break. I'll share just a very quick story of going to Disneyland with my nephew who has some sensory needs, and we early on identified a shady place where we could go, and we kind of formed a little semicircle around him. He put in his headphones. He had something cool to drink. And I really think that extended our day, probably an hour and a half longer than it would have been without that planning and having those things prepared. So I know that it's hard, but it does help when you have those strategies in place. And then set the expectations ahead of time for how long the event's going to be. Allow breaks when needed. We've talked about that. And then talk to the family or the host of the event just to set some expectations around that. And as we're going, we'd love to hear from you too. You're the experts in this as well. So if you have strategies that really work for your family that we're not covering, or that you really want to share with the other families, please put those in the chat. Just make sure you're chatting to everyone. So you might need to click on that little button and just chat to everyone in the meeting. And we want to hear your strategies. So if you have things that you do, please share those with us too. Okay, so during the holidays and other special occasions, you're often going to see some family that you haven't seen in a while. And this is especially true, now that we're starting to reconnect more with our family and friends. So grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles, they don't always understand what's happening for your child's sensory systems. So whether or not your child has sensory challenges, body autonomy is absolutely crucial. And during the holidays, we of course want to continue to teach our kids that they have control over their own bodies, so that no one should feel pressured to engage in a way that isn't comfortable. So offering alternatives for that physical touch, high fives, waves, that can be really helpful. And just sort of supporting your child in what is most comfortable for them is going to be really crucial at this time. And helping your family members understand it a little bit too.
All right, thanks, Karen, for that. I think parents, you can attest that sometimes your child may have trouble with just everyday regular clothes right now. And then we're thinking about putting on that fuzzy sweater that Aunt Sally mailed to your child, and you want to, show your appreciation for the gift, but your child might say, absolutely not. So definitely things that you want to think about, is it really festive if it's causing discomfort to your child? Can you plan ahead and say, all right, you can pick, you know, between these two choices so that we can take the family picture and then bring your favorite clothes that you want to change into afterwards. And consider dressing festively for the family picture, and then maybe letting the kids take a silly picture so it makes that outfit not so uncomfortable for them. Ooh, who loves putting on all that winter weight from those amazing meals that we're going to be eating? Karen, will you show our next slide? Because I think our families will very much appreciate this one. All right, who's the chicken nugget eater in the family? I am, my family. But slather some gravy on it and I'll be just fine. All right, so most importantly, you want to make sure that you're going to have safe foods available for them. If you have a picky eater, chances are they won't be super interested in trying the stuffing or cranberry sauce or any other foods that aren't usually around on the table most of the year. And it's totally, absolutely 100% okay to bring mac and cheese or their favorite McDonald's chicken nuggets to dinner to make sure that they're going to be able to enjoy the food that is comfortable and safe for them. All right. If your child has a plate or a fork that they love to use at home, bring it with them. It will make them feel more comfortable and very familiar for them in a new setting that they're having a different meal at. If your child is comfortable to maybe try some of the new foods that are going to be on the table at this time of the year, make sure it's teeny tiny portions. We still want to give them the exposure to the new food without it being overwhelming. So this might be something in a family meeting you're going to talk about, hey, you know what, there might be sweet potatoes instead of mashed potatoes. Would you like to try it? And just put a little bit on their plate. But most importantly, try not to pressure them to take the bite of something or let Aunt Susie say, oh, but honey, I spent hours cooking on this. It's not fair and it's going to make them feel very uncomfortable. And what's the point of being together with a family if you're not having a good time? So as long as they have their safe food on the plate, they know that they will eat something that's familiar to them.
Yeah, this might not be the time to do a lot of food exploration when senses are already heightened and we already have some sensory and some task demands that we're dealing with. So absolutely, that safe food is going to be, I think, the way to go.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we know as OTs that when you have a child prep in any of the food, they're more invested. They may be more willing to try something. So maybe have your child help you with the grocery list for what needs to be brought for the meal, or get them in the kitchen and see if they can help you mash some up of those potatoes. Talk about some prop input for them. Works on ADL skills, measuring and pouring into it. Then they will take a little bit more accountability and maybe invest more in maybe possibly trying that food.
And anytime you can get into the kitchen and get that tactile input and new textures and new flavors, it's always a good thing.
And wonderful family memories. Yes, that's why I love the kitchen, because I grew up in there with my family. But most importantly, engage in activities which are going to be calming for their nervous system as well as yours. Can you take a walk, or can you go play in the park before everyone sits down at the table, right? Again, we had talked about that there's the change in routine. So there might be more demand for that vestibular and probe input that your sensory seekers are craving, or even your sensory avoiders might need that additional probe input of walking to kind of collect their thoughts and get more aware of their own interoceptive system. Go back to sensory. That's always the answer. Again, the most important thing to focus on this holiday season is the positive memories that you're going to be making. Your child may not remember what they did or didn't eat that year, but they will remember the way that they felt with their family, and having those memories last a lifetime. And most importantly, this is just one meal out of 1,000 that your child will eat in a year. So in the grand scheme of things, This meal won't make or break your child's eating preferences. Maybe they'll try the sweet potatoes and enjoy it, but it's not a big deal. At the end of the day, if your child will only eat 3 buttered rolls and some chicken nuggets, but had fun playing with their cousins and aunts and uncles, then that's what mattered the most. Ooh, travel time. So remember, prep is your friend. Make sure that you're giving your child enough notice of you'll be traveling by plane, by car, by train, and putting it on the calendar to let them know when the upcoming travel will be coming. Make sure that they're wearing comfortable clothes and shoes. Will they be walking a lot in the airport, or going through airport security, sitting in the long car ride to grandma or grandpa's? Don't forget to pack their loveys. Make sure it's the last thing in the suitcase, so it's the first thing that comes out. Also in the car, you can always have your child wear a weighted lap pad to kind of give more of that input when they're seated in the plane or your car. Target has some amazing games that are travel companion games that are perfect to keep your child occupied for long car rides. And also airports with their map definitely have areas of quiet areas that if your child is feeling overwhelmed, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can go in there, have a little meditation. It's very quiet. I think the San Francisco airport even has one that has like dimming lights, and you can do yoga in there. And Target, the dollar bin, has amazing fidgets. I was just there today. Because again, sometimes waiting at the airport can bring about some boredom, right? And our patience runs too, because we're stressing. Sometimes even having to wait before a show starts, or if their child is doing a performance. So again, letting the child know how long the activity is going to be is definitely going to help them anticipate how much that they might need, or if they're going to need a break in the middle of it. Bring those oral engine changers, something to suck on like a lollipop, something to chew would definitely help pass the time. Electronics, if you're allowed to bring that into the environment, by all means, let them be occupied with that. But also you can have the time to have the discussion with your child to acknowledge that feeling bored is okay. We don't have to be stimulated 24/7, even though we have these with us all the time.
All right, so we talked about some general holiday challenges and strategies, boredom and mealtime and travel. And we want to move on and dive into some specific sensory systems and how we can use sensory strategies to help around the holidays, but also really anytime. So proprioception is anything that offers joint traction or joint compression. So we have these little tiny receptors in our joints and muscles and connective tissues, and they're triggered by actions like pushing and pulling and hanging and crashing and carrying, or really any very deep pressure. And those receptors trigger the release of serotonin, which is our major regulatory chemical and in the cortex of our brain. So that the effects of the serotonin include improved attention, availability for learning, calm, grounded feelings, and really they work to kind of break up some other neurochemicals in our system which prevent hyperactivity. So proprioception is the go-to regulator in terms of our sensory systems. Things like big hugs, trampoline, crashing into pillows. And if you guys on the chat have any good deep pressure or heavy work activities, please put them up there. Digging, crawling, carrying heavy things, pushing heavy things, like pushing the shopping cart in the grocery store, doing some chores around the house, jumping off the bed and landing on pillows. Someone mentioned in our last time we did this talk, they mentioned like, what are they called? Burrito rolls or burrito roll-ups, where you have the child lie on the ground and you roll them up in a blanket and then pull the blanket and they kind of go crashing away, which we do hear sometimes. Just big squeezes and anything that really provides that heavy work and deep pressure. And just, you cannot overdose on proprioception. Other sensory systems, you can get too much and it can be sort of dysregulating, but for proprioceptive input, you just cannot get enough. So it's always a go-to. Oops, too far. Our proprioceptive favorite is a blowing activity called Bubble Mountain. So this is something you could put together at home or at a relative's house. It's great resistive work for the mouth. It facilitates deep breathing, and that can be calming and organizing. And it's really fun. So you just fill a bowl up with water, throw a variety of soaps and bubbles in there, and then blow it with a straw and see how high you can make that mountain or that volcano grow. Our kids love it, and those deep breaths can be really helpful for calming down and helping to avoid that sensory overflow. And then we have our vestibular sense, and that's our sense of movement and balance. It tells us where our head is in space, and it allows us to stay upright while sitting, standing, and walking. And movement contributes to our self-regulation and our sort of level of arousal and activity level. So if your child is bored or tired or running out of steam, you choose fast, arrhythmic, or unpredictable movement activities like fast jumping, bouncing on a yoga ball, getting outside to run around, anything that seems like it would wake up a tired nervous system, a slow nervous system. And then if your child is running on high or high alert, if they're revved up or excited, if they're overstimulated or overwhelmed, you want to choose vestibular input that is slow, rhythmic, and predictable. So that's going to help to bring down an excited nervous system. So things like taking a slow walk, calming and organizing movement activities, that like rocking, swinging on a playground swing, that can really slow down an amped up nervous system. And then during the holidays, when we're out of our usual routine, sometimes it means that we're not getting the regular environmental cues that our kids are used to do things like eating, drinking, using the bathroom. So if you're sort of seeing that your child is looking out of sorts, it might be a sensory thing. It might be too loud or too bright, but it also might be that they're just not getting the things that they need, the simple things, the food, the drinks, the snacks, the sleep that they are used to. So, you know, helping them do kind of a body scan to just see, are you feeling hungry? Are you feeling thirsty? Do you need to use the bathroom? And scanning that body to really try to figure out what's going on with their interoception, their internal feeling.
Excuse me. So obviously the tactile and the touch. For some of our friends that have tactile sensitivities, this would definitely be a time that if you've been instructed on doing the Wilbarger protocol, you might be upping it. Instead of 3 times a day, you might be doing it 5 times a day because your child might be feeling overly stimulated and it's just too much for their body. And again, so something like this, if you can put them in the front of the line, if you're checking through security, if they have a holiday performance that they're doing at school, talk to the teacher and say, you know, can Samir be on the edge so that there's only one peer next to him? As Karen has very eloquently stated before, something that it's light and kind of tickly is going to be more alerting. So that's why tickling our friends kind of brings out that silly laughter from them. Sensory bins, you know, we have one here that we've made out of popcorn kernels, and it's got little leaves and different things. So let their little hands dig in there. Shaving cream is always an amazing, quick and easy, sometimes messy, tactile play for our friends. But the opposite, something that is deep pressure is going to be more calming to their system. So that's why the big bear hugs, Karen had mentioned the burrito rolls, rolling them up really tightly. massage, you know, the deep pressure and the stroking on their, all of their limbs, even on top of their head, can be very calming and organizing for them.
We have this new stuff called Happy Senso, and it's the best. If you haven't found it, I recommend going to the TheraPro website and buying some Happy Senso. It's, I don't even know how to describe it. It looks like it's coming out of a hair mousse can, shaving cream can, and it's a foam that pops and crackles. It's cold. Some of them have scent. Some of them have color. But the kids love it. And it is a wonderful tactile, especially I find for kids who are always touching everything, digging in things, they are loving this Happy Senso. Maybe Kerry, I don't know if you can find it and put it in the chat from TheraPro, but it's been a huge hit when it's a good time.
I can grab that in the next part. Oops, maybe this one. Obviously, during the holidays, there's a lot of visual things to look at. I have to confess, I was at Kohl's literally the day before Halloween, and they'd already put up their Christmas stuff, and I was just visually, it was too much for my system. So for me, I needed to take a break and get out of the store. But definitely you can wear sunglasses if things are too stimulating visually. Allow maybe a space in your house that maybe isn't decorated, because it can allow for that quiet time when they're feeling overwhelmed. Making sure trying to get out during the day to get that natural light that can help regulate their sleep-wake cycle. And again, if it's too much, you can always limit the lights. And sometimes the lights that you can get on different holiday decorations, you have different settings that you can do. It can be the fast flashing, or you can have it just static and have it on the entire time. Your child will let you know what their preference is for that.
Yeah, sometimes here we just turn off the lights and let the natural light in, and we find that if there's a lot going on in the gym and there's a lot of kids around, we turn off those lights and it just calm down.
And again, who's been hearing holiday music already? Some people are a very big fan of that. Other people are like, it's too much, it's overwhelming for my ears. So as Karen had mentioned, anything that kind of has a soft rhythmic sound, kind of like drums, almost kind of like the heartbeat, is going to be more calming and organizing to your system. Or conversely, if you want to be more woken up, it's going to be kind of the arrhythmical jazz, kind of peppy pop kind of music. And again, for sensitive friends, it's okay. Turn the music off. Let them have headphones if they're going to be at a family function with tons of different conversations going on, but that might be too hard to filter through. And by all means, you know, honor what your child is telling you, what their body is feeling.
You know, when if you're looking for some music that is really good for regulating the nervous system, Mozart tends to be very regulating. It kind of mimics our body's rhythms when we're in a nice, calm, resting state. So it can help entrain your body to that music. So any kind of Mozart for modulation, calming Mozart, tends to be really good for calming a excited nervous system.
I'm going to put some of that on too for me. Again, the holiday brings so many different smells that we don't normally have, you know, throughout the year. I just walked into Sprouts today and I was hit with the cinnamon pine cones because they were right at the door as I walked in. For me, that was a pleasant smell, but for some people that might be overwhelming. So again, mint and citrus and spicy strong scents are going to be often alerting to the system, where opposite, more like vanilla and lavender are going to be calming to the system. They make some really great sensory necklaces that are clay-based that you can put essential oils on. So if your child is more on the sensitive side to smells, you could put on a favorite scent that they enjoy so that when they enter into, say, the restaurant or the, the family room for dinner with all those different foods on the table, if that's overwhelming for them, they could sniff, their lavender or their vanilla, a calming scent for them.
You can also throw them in a little plastic baggie, put the oil on a cotton ball, put the cotton ball in a plastic bag. That was one of Kerry's crafts that we did earlier this year, or in a little old-fashioned film canister, if you still have any of those lying around.
Are those even available? All right. And then, of course, the engine changers, right? The gustatory or sense of taste. So again, anything that's sour or spicy, cold and crunchy is going to increase your arousal. Think about what you used to eat when you were studying during school, or paying attention to that professor, probably what you're doing right now with us. Or conversely, something that is sweet or kind of chewy, like bubble gum, is going to be more calming to the system and kind of organizing for it. Bring those silly straws with you and help make it so that if your child is needing more of that oral motor input, it's a great probe input. And bringing their water bottles. Bring Z vibes if your child has some feeding aversions. You can still, it's going to be a meal, give them the input from the Z vibe before you sit down to eat.
All right, we're getting wrapped up here. That was sort of our sensory systems, and an important note, whenever possible, try to be proactive with your use of these strategies. So if you're using them as regularly and consistently throughout the day as possible, which we know is difficult, that's going to be the most beneficial. So you might wake up in the morning with big pillow squishes while your child is still in bed, and then they could do some animal walks to breakfast. During breakfast, you might use a twisty straw to drink yogurt or smoothie or your water. That will provide some input to your mouth. At breakfast, then you can kind of talk about the day ahead. You could even use little index cards to kind of represent the activities for the day. So breakfast, get dressed, travel, airport, whatever they are. If your child kind of can have any control over the order of those activities, they could kind of rearrange the cards in a way that would feel good for them and give them a little control. They might get a little more buy-in that way. And then you might plan a park visit for the morning if you have an event in the afternoon, and then schedule quiet time in the late afternoon, and then maybe have your regular dinner at home, soft music under a weighted blanket before bedtime. And that's just kind of how to structure, this is a sensory day in an ideal world when you don't have reality kind of knocking at your door. But these are some ideas of how to get ahead of the overflow. So it's best, if you can, not to wait until the cup is already ready to overflow, but just keep that level a little bit lower than that threshold, and we might not have to worry as much about some of these overloaded moments. And then finally, it's easier said than done, of course, as parents and busy families, but as much as you can, please try to remember to take care of your own sensory and self-care needs as you move through the holiday season. It's a stressful time for parents, and you'll be sort of better prepared to handle your child's overflowing bucket if your cup is filled with just the right amount.
And it's really good modeling. You're showing your child, you know what, mom and dad are taking some time because my engine is feeling like it's running too high and too hot. So I'm going to go take a break right now, or I'm going to listen to music. Your children are always watching you. So you're their first role model.
Yeah. And that's it. This is a time to ask questions. So we have about, 15 minutes, 10 minutes left in our hour. If you want to stick around and put some questions in the chat, or you can unmute and ask a question out loud. And then if you have questions that you're not comfortable sharing here, you can ask us privately in the chat, or you can send us an email. We listed our email addresses there, and Kerry put them in the chat. If you have any questions about therapies at Development of Child's Play, our community preschool program, please, call the office, call me, call Kerry, email, however you want to get in touch. And we would love to, give you some more information about our services and our programs. And also just thanks so much for giving us so much of your time today. I know we're getting close to the holidays and we wanted to grab you before the time got too short, but we're just extremely grateful for our families, our DICP families, our partners that we work with in the Bay Area to help the kids that we're able to help. So we're grateful for you as Thanksgiving approaches. We're feeling very grateful, and we're happy that you were here. So we'll open it up for, oh, sorry, Kerry.
I forgot to add during the mealtime. Like I said, I was at Target today and I just picked this up. This is a simple, cute little tablecloth that it has fine motor activities. So if where you're going, if there's an area, you can put it on the table, let all the kids kind of color together to give them something to do before the mealtime. I'm actually going to open this up and put it on our coffee table out in the waiting room.
Fun. And you have little placemats too, little colorful.
This one came from Michael's and they were just cute. Again, little things to keep a child entertained during the mealtime.
That's great. So we're going to open it up for any questions. You can unmute or ask in the chat. We'll look at that. Or you can hop off and get going with the rest of your night. But thanks so much, everyone, for being here.
Karen, Susan asked in the chats if the slides can be shared, and I said that we could do that afterwards.
Yeah, we can share. Let's see, what's the best way to do that? You could send me a message, I guess, if you'd like. Send an email to Karen at DICP Therapy, which is the same place that many of you RSVP'd. So you can send us a message if you would like the slides from tonight. You can share those. But the presentation will be recorded in YouTube sometime, in our YouTube, which is Development as Child's Play. And that will be somewhere soon. We can figure out how to get it up there.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to step away. My son wanted me in the bedroom, so I apologize. Are you wrapping up? I can ask it later or
no, we've got plenty of time. Yeah.
Okay. And I apologize if this was asked already. So I'm talking specifically about my 10-year-old. We are going over to a family friend's house for Thanksgiving, and he knows them and everything. And one of the things that we try to scaffold is to, encourage the social engagement. We're sitting at the table eating Thanksgiving dinner and, we're just having conversation, and he definitely gets very quiet, but we're trying to also help him, engage in conversation. And we don't want to put too much pressure on him, but we also want to help him. I mean, he's showing progress. We want to help kind of continue to, I don't know if stretch is the right word, but just help him engage, because the families will be asking him questions and we want to try to help him kind of go, have that back and forth and everything. Any way to think about that, or any advice or tips on how we can kind of feel like we're supporting him, but also trying to teach him kind of how you engage at a meal?
Kerry, do you have any thoughts about that one?
Yeah, I was going to say, since these are kind of family friends, maybe it would be okay, again, talking about prep ahead of time, that maybe the two families come up with like a list of questions that then you could share with your son ahead of time so that he doesn't feel kind of on the spot. But then having him say, I don't know, for example, with your child, if, oh, hey, are you into Minecraft, something, and that then your son would have then a secondary question to have as a follow-up for that. So again, it's that prepping ahead of time. Like you said, we're trying to practice kind of casual conversation, but always kind of giving a little bit of knowledge ahead of time of what those questions would be, I think are very helpful.
Okay, and I recognize this seems like a social question, but it was more of like, we feel like he gets overwhelmed. Like just there's a lot going on. And so that's really kind of where I was coming from. I wasn't really necessarily, so that's great. Thank you very much.
So it wasn't necessarily a topic. It's just in that moment, he's feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think that's what happens is he starts to, and it's almost like, as we're trying to give him the space to respond, he almost kind of closes down even more sometimes. So I feel like it's more sensory, but I could be wrong. And I realize I don't want to totally hijack this. That's just where I was coming from. So, but that's helpful. And we'll just continue to work with them on that and kind of do the preview that you talked about. So thank you.
And sometimes when our friends, to answer a question, right, conversation, the idea is we're so taught like to look at somebody, but that can be very overwhelming and, making you feel very uncomfortable. So having him socially to look at the peer, but not necessarily, they don't have to look them in the eyes. He could look up at the forehead, right? Like you're still showing that you're attuned to that person and you're engaged with them. But the idea of eye to eye contact can sometimes be too much. I know when I'm doing this talk right now, I'm not looking at the screen because I know all of your faces are looking at me. So it's my strategy that I'm still engaged, but I don't have to get overwhelmed by having all the eyes look at me.
And I, when I'm with a group of good friends, have pretty good social skills, but when I'm in a group of family friends or people I don't know well, it's a lot harder for me. I do feel like I get more overwhelmed by the sensory input of my environment. And like Kerry said, the eye contact and the noise and the smells. And so I think that preparation that we were talking about, is more about when everything else is unpredictable, having some things that are predictable and kind of at the ready is going to be helpful, because you're not going to have to pull them out of thin air when you're already kind of managing the sensory stresses of the environment. So having a few topics ready, he might even have a couple of jokes, that he's kind of memorized. And so just having that preparation can just minimize the impact of the overwhelming sensation. That's a
Thank
great
you so
question.
much.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions, specific questions? And even if they're not holiday related, you've got 2 OTs here for another 5-10 minutes that you could ask us anything. Feel free to type it in or unmute and check in.
I really liked how Karen was bringing up and at the end, making sure, they say it on the plane, you have to put your mask on first, right? So really making the time to focus on your own regulation, because if you're stressed out, there's no way you're going to be able to help your child. So self-care is very, very important. We need to practice more of that.
Yeah, they talk about that. As co-regulation. So using your own body, your own energy as an assist regulator for your child's energy. So in therapy, we do a lot. It's called therapeutic use of self. We see where our kids are coming in, where their sort of energy level is coming in. And if they're just low and slow after a long day, we will beef up our energy and let's go and let's do this, and use our own kind of level of energy to co-regulate with our kids. And that's something that is so difficult when everyone's overwhelmed with holiday stuff, but taking a moment, taking the breath, counting to 10, and then using your own levels of arousal and energy as a co-regulator can be really helpful to help everybody stay calm and organized and ready to have fun during the holidays. Well, it doesn't look like any other questions are coming in, but if you do have any for us, send us messages, send us emails. And just thanks again so much for joining us today. We'll send out slides to anyone who emails either of us and expresses interest. We'll get them set up in a PDF and get them sent out. So please let us know. And then if you have questions about services or partnering with the ICP, we're here. And we look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thanks, everyone.